In preparation for my new YouTube series, Draw With Me, which I'll be launching later this month, I'm making available the custom brushes that I use to draw in Adobe Illustrator. The brush pack consists of 11 custom brushes that I've created over the past 4 years to fulfill all of my and now your doodling needs. And in this video, I'm going to go through each brush one by one, showing you what it's for and how to use it. I'll also be showing you how to install the brushes once you've purchased them, which you can do in my Gumroad store for just $5, and I'll have a link to my Doodle brush pack in the description section of this video. So if you're somebody who's been thinking about learning how to draw in Adobe Illustrator, or you're somebody who's been drawing in Illustrator for a while now but just want to improve the appearance of your line work, then this video is for you. Because using the proper brush can take your illustrations from looking like this to looking like this. And this can all be done by simply using the right brush. So if you want to take your drawings in Adobe Illustrator to the next level, then stick around. Hey guys, Greg here. Hope everybody's doing well. Okay, so before I start showing you the brushes, I just want to make it clear that this brush pack was designed exclusively for creating line work. You won't find any fancy paint brushes in this pack, so if you're looking for watercolor or charcoal brushes, then this isn't the pack for you. This brush pack was designed solely for the purpose of creating vector line art in Adobe Illustrator. And trust me, once you see how simple my technique for painting in Adobe Illustrator is, you'll understand why there are no fancy paint brushes in this collection. That being said, if you're ready, let's install these brushes. Okay, so when you first download the brush pack, it'll come packed in an RAR zip folder. If you don't have RAR extraction software on your computer, I've put a link in the description section of my Doodle Brush Pack product page to a website where you can download a free version of the software. Now this file will be placed in the Downloads folder on your computer. All you have to do is right-click on it and select Extract Files here from the pop-up menu. Inside of the zip file, you'll find two files. The first is the Adobe Illustrator file that contains the brush pack itself, and the second is a notepad document that contains the terms of use for the brushes that you just purchased. The terms of use simply state that you can use these brushes to create artwork for both personal as well as commercial projects, but that you're not allowed to resell or redistribute the brushes in any way. I strongly recommend that you save the original RAR zip file somewhere on your computer where you can find it. If by chance you should ever buy a new computer and have to reinstall your Adobe software on that new computer, you're also going to have to reinstall the brush pack as well. Okay, so to install the brush pack, all you have to do is double click on the Adobe Illustrator file to open it up in Illustrator. Now once it's open, the brushes should appear under the Brushes tab in the right-hand menu. If you don't see the Brushes tab, just go to the Window tab in the top menu and then open it from the drop-down menu. If you look at the brushes, you'll notice that there are two extra brushes in here, the basic and the standard brushes. These are not part of the pack, they just automatically appear when you open any file in Illustrator. Now to save these brushes to Illustrator's brush menu, you need to click on the 3-band line icon in the top right hand corner of the brush menu, and from the drop down menu choose Save Brush Library. Illustrator will automatically choose the proper folder where the external brush packs need to be saved within the Adobe Illustrator program files. I recommend that you leave the name as is, just so that you don't confuse them with any other brush packs you may have downloaded. All you have to do now is click the Save button. Once you've done that, you can now close down this CB Doodle brush pack file. And if you open up a new project, you'll notice that Adobe stock brushes appear in the brush menu. To open the newly installed brush pack, all you have to do is go back up to that 3-lined icon in the top right-hand corner of the brush menu and click on it. Then from the drop-down menu, place your cursor over the Open Brush Library tab, and then from the sub-menu, place your cursor over the User Defined. And then from that pop-up menu, choose the CB Doodle brush pack. Okay, so the brushes are going to appear in their own floating menu. What I like to do is, using my cursor, select the very top of the brush menu and drag it over to the edge of the artboard until I see the border highlighted in blue. Then I just release my left mouse button. This will place the brushes in their own column. Next, I go over to the Brushes tab, right-click on it, and close it. Now I'm left with my Doodle Brush tab and my Layers tab. If you look at the very top of the Doodle Brush tab, you can see an icon with two little arrows. Just click on that to collapse the Brushes tab. Now I personally don't like to have two tabs open side by side while I draw. It takes up too much room. So for that reason, I'm just going to place my cursor over the left side of the Brushes tab and then slide it all the way to the right until I'm left with just a single brush icon. This, in my opinion, is the perfect setup. When you're drawing, you always want to have access to your Layers menu, so that should remain open all the time. But your Brush menu only needs to be open when you need to change your brush. The first time that you click on this icon, the menu will probably be shortened like this. Just drag the bottom of the menu down until all of the brushes are showing. Now, every time you click on that brush menu icon, the full Doodle brush pack will show. And as you can see, those default brushes are no longer part of the pack. Just know that every time you open Adobe Illustrator for a new session, that you're going to have to reopen the CB Doodle brush pack in the Brushes menu. As long as you keep Illustrator open, the brushes will remain. They only get removed when you shut the software down. Illustrator will always open up with its own default brushes. Okay, now that we have the brushes installed, let's take a look at them. Now I just want to point out that all of these brushes are fixed. My goal when I created them was to recreate the feel of drawing on paper using a ballpoint pen. Brushes that are pressure sensitive give the feeling of drawing with a felt tip marker or a paintbrush. That being said, although I do want to retain a consistent line weight from brushstroke to brushstroke, I also wanted there to be a variable line weight within each individual stroke itself. That way, if you wanted to thicken up a particular stroke, you wouldn't have to go over it a few times like you would have to when you're using a ballpoint pen on paper. So with this set of brushes, that line weight variation is built right into the brush itself, as you'll see in a moment. Okay, so the first brush in this pack is the double taper brush. This is my go-to brush for at least 80% of my drawing. Now I know some people are going to say, but aren't there already default inking brushes in Adobe Illustrator? And yes, there are. But the problem with them is that the taper is only at the end of the stroke. And when drawing in Illustrator, the end of the stroke is usually cut off during the cleanup process. So what you're left with is one consistent line weight throughout your entire drawing, and you don't want that. Now you can apply a double taper width profile to this default ink brush, but then the taper becomes too extreme, and you don't want that either. What you want is a nice gradual taper throughout the entire stroke. Now just know that if you decide that you want that extreme taper, that you can always apply that same width profile to this double taper brush and get that same exact result. But trust me, when you're drawing a full page illustration for coloring books or comics, extreme tapers like this will only be used on rare occasions. The gradual taper is what you're going to be using the most. And this double taper brush can be used on any type of drawing. Whether you're drawing thin-lined, high-detail adult coloring book pages or bold-line character art to be used in coloring pages for 1 to 4-year-olds, this brush can do it all. Now the one problem with this brush is that if you want your connection joint to be thick instead of tapered, then you're going to have to overshoot your stroke by quite a bit to achieve that bold-on-bold intersection. Now if all you have are 2 strokes on the page, then doing this is no big deal. But if you're coming to the end of a full page highly detailed doodle, the last thing that you want to be doing is drawing over all of this other artwork to achieve that effect. Because now you're going to have to go back and clean up all of this other artwork. And that's why I created my second and third brush. My second brush is the round head right taper brush. This brush also has a consistent taper throughout the entire brush, unlike the Adobe stock brush. It also has a rounded head for situations where you want a finished look to your stroke, and I'll give you an example of that in just a second. But the main reason that I created this brush was so that I could get that thick joint without having to overshoot the stroke. But this brush also comes in handy when you're creating mandala art. Having that nice tapered stroke with a finished end can really add a lot of elegance to your design. Now the third brush is the round head left taper brush, which by the name alone pretty much gives away the fact that it's just the reverse of the second brush. When drawing on a tablet, every artist is different. Some artists are more comfortable when they're pushing a stroke, while others feel that they have more control when they're pulling the stroke. These two brushes cater to both sides of that coin. I myself feel that I have more control when I'm pulling the stroke as opposed to pushing it. So if I'm creating a set of ominous shark teeth, I'm perfectly comfortable pulling the stroke downwards to create those teeth. But when I start to create the bottom teeth, I can't continue to pull down because the wide end of the stroke is at the wrong end. So I have no other choice but to push up. And this can sometimes lead to me having to redraw strokes multiple times to get it right. But if I use the reverse brush, I can continue to pull down on the stroke and quickly get the result that I'm looking for. This is one of those brushes that was designed for convenience more than anything else. Now the fourth brush in my Doodle brush pack is the middle taper brush. There are going to be times where you not only want to taper at both ends of your stroke, but in the middle as well. A prime example of this is when you're drawing the lines on a forehead or breasts. Whenever you're drawing, you always want to try and place the thick part of your stroke on the shadow side of your object. So having that third taper in the middle of the brush can really come in handy. And it's not just for breasts and foreheads. It can also be used in a lot of other places, like the bottom of an apple. The next brush in this pack is the single line brush, which I use as a bolding brush. When you're drawing really detailed doodles, there are going to be times where the drawing gets so busy that it becomes hard to read. So to help break it up for the viewer, it's not a bad idea to go in and add some bolding. Adding that bold stroke can give your illustration a little bit more of a finished look to it. And when you're doing bolding, you don't want there to be a taper in the brush stroke. You want the line weight to always be consistent, otherwise the bold outline won't be giving you the effect that you're looking for. Okay, the sixth brush in this pack is the double line brush. This brush actually has a few uses. The first is when you're creating mandala art. Parallel lines can really add a nice visual touch to your design. But when you're creating mandala art, consistency is really important. If your line art is even slightly off parallel, then the pattern of your design will really start to look wonky. And if you're creating a really unique brush stroke, it can often be very difficult to keep your lines perfectly parallel, and that's what makes this brush so useful. But you can also use it to help you get a more stylized look to your artwork. And all you need to do is just add a width profile to it. This will give the stroke a whole different look. So let's say that you're creating a Valentine's Day themed word search puzzle book, and you need some heart-shaped clip art. Using this brush will give you a much more stylized version of a heart shape. Now when you're creating vector line art in Illustrator, there's a cleanup process that you need to do to get rid of unwanted edges. It's fairly simple. Just select all of your strokes using your selection tool, that's the black arrow. Then go up to the Object tab in the top menu and from the drop-down choose Group. Then with the object still selected, go back up to the Object tab and this time choose Expand Appearance. Once you've got that done, go back up to the Object tab and then go down to Live Paint and from the sub-menu choose Make. And then the final step is to go back up one more time, down to Live Paint, only this time choose Expand from the sub-menu. Now if you grab your Direct Selection tool, which is the white arrow, you can now delete all of those overlapping lines. And as you can see, you get a really nice stylized looking heart shape. But it gets even better. Let's say you want a color heart for your book's cover. Before you color this, there is one more step that you're going to want to take. Start by going up to the Window tab in the top menu and from the drop-down choose Pathfinder. Now if you zoom in on the top of the heart shape and using your Direct Selection tool click on different parts of this stroke, you'll notice that they're all separate pieces, and I want them all to be one piece. So I'm going to grab my Selection tool, which is the black arrow, and select my heart shape. Then I'm going to go over to the Pathfinder menu and click on the first icon, which is the Unite icon. This will make all of these separate pieces into one single piece. Once I've completed this, using my Direct Selection arrow, I can now select the inside stroke. Next, I'm going to go back over to my toolbar and choose my Selection tool, which is the black arrow. And as you can see, I now have the transform box around the inside stroke. So what I'm going to do now is scale it down a bit. And with it still selected, I'm going to click on my color swatch and change the color to a light pink. Next, I'm going to grab my Direct Selection tool, which is the white arrow, and I'm going to select the outside stroke. And with that selected, double click on my color swatch and change that color to a dark pink. Next, I'm going to grab my selection arrow one more time and select the entire heart shape. With it selected, I'm going to go up to the Object tab in the top menu, down to Live Paint, and from the sub-menu, I'm going to choose Make. Doing this will allow me to bucket fill in the shape with color. So now I'm going to go over to my toolbar and select my Bucket Fill tool. Then with my bucket tool still selected, I'm going to hold down my Alt key on my keyboard and then sample that light pink color from the inside stroke. Next, I'm going to bucket fill the inside of the heart shape with that light pink color. Finally, I'm going to double click on my color swatch and I'm going to select a shade of pink that's somewhere between my dark and my light shade. And then I'm going to bucket fill in the remaining white area of my heart shape. Doing this will make your colored in heart shape a little more stylized. But you can take this one step further. Using your Direct Selection tool, the white arrow, select the medium pink fill color, and with it selected, grab your selection arrow, that's the black one, and then simply resize and offset the middle pink fill area. Doing this will add sort of a 3D look to your heart shape. And you can do this with pretty much any basic shape. Your only limitation is your own imagination. Okay, let's move on to the next brush. So brush number 7 is the bottle brush. Now you may think it looks very similar to the double line brush, but as you'll see, its sole purpose is for creating bottles. Now a lot of artists when they're first getting started have a tendency to draw bottles that look like this. It's kind of boring. When you actually look at the side profile of a glass bottle, there's an outside line and an inside line with an empty space in between them. So if you want to make your bottle look a little more stylized, then you need to add in that space. And this is where the bottle brush comes in. Now you can try and draw these two lines perfectly parallel to each other, but trust me, it's a pain in the ass. Once you have your bottle drawn, what you want to do is run your water line up to the inside stroke only. This gives the illusion of the space between the inside and the outside of the bottle. Now I personally like to keep the inside line going throughout the entire bottle. Aesthetically, I think it just looks better. But if you want to, you can always delete the stroke above the water line like so. It's entirely up to you. But either way, this brush is going to save you a hell of a lot of time when you're trying to get that water line parallel to the outside of the bottle. Okay, on to brush number 8. I call this next brush the vine brush. Now if you've watched any of my Doodle podcast videos, you probably realize that I'm a big fan of drawing vines. And I just recently designed this brush to make that process a heck of a lot easier. All you have to do is pick your stroke weight. Just know that the higher your stroke number, the thicker the vine will be. Then draw out your vine. Next, you'll have to do the cleanup process. When you're done, use your direct selection tool to delete the overlapping lines. Now if you want to take this vine one step further, grab your double taper brush from the Doodle brush pack, reduce the stroke until it's about the same weight as the vine strokes are. Now just draw in a bunch of little thorn shapes all along the vine. Make sure that the strokes are overlapping the outside line of the vine. Now you just want to run through that cleanup process. Now when it comes to deleting the overlapping lines, you definitely want to delete the overlap at the point of the thorn. But when it comes to the overlap in the vine, don't delete the thorn overlap. Delete the vine in between the two sides of the thorn. That will make your thorns look like they're part of the vine. When you're creating detailed full-page doodles, some thorny vines can really add a lot to your overall composition. Okay, on to the next two brushes. Now brushes 9 and 10 were both designed exclusively for creating mandala art. Adding fine detail to a mandala can really bring your design up a notch. And trying to create equally spaced scaling circles can be extremely time-consuming using the ellipse tool. So these two brushes just make easy work of it. Now both brushes are exactly the same with the exception that one has solid fill and the other has an outline. After drawing with this brush, you would think that to make the circles larger, all you'd have to do is increase the stroke weight, but you'd be wrong. If you want the circles larger, all you have to do is draw a longer line. That being said, a cool thing happens when you do increase the stroke weight. Now because these aren't individual circles, they're all actually part of the same stroke. When you increase the stroke weight, all that really happens is that each of the circles begin to narrow, which is kind of a cool effect if you're ever drawing something that is going off into the distance and you need some holes along the side of it. Imagine drawing a mandala that has three-dimensional elements to it. If you play with this for a little while, you could probably create something that's pretty mind-blowing. In all honesty, I didn't actually intend for these brushes to do this. It was just sort of a happy accident. But either way, these two brushes can really help take your mandala art to the next level. And this brings us to the final brush, which is the rough brush. I think that every inking brush pack should have a rough brush in it. But what I don't like about most rough brushes is that they're either too rough, in other words, they're too jagged, or they're just a small stencil that repeats itself multiple times over the entire length of the brush. I wanted my rough brush to still have that bold line weight and taper that the rest of my brushes have. I just wanted it to have a little bit more of a lead pencil look to it. And this brush is not a stencil. No matter how long the brush stroke is, the grip pattern will never repeat. Now the real reason I created this brush for my own pack is because I'm a huge fan of old school animation art. I mean, I'm talking Steamboat Willie, Felix the Cat, and Betty Boop. And if you've ever taken a close look at some of the original sketches of these characters, they're pretty gritty. And sometimes I just want to recreate that look when I'm feeling nostalgic. Kind of like the way that Cuphead was created in the old school style of animation art, every now and then I just want my artwork to get dirty. And this brush, as well as all of the brushes I previously mentioned, can all be found in my Doodle brush pack. Okay, so hopefully after seeing what all of these brushes can do, you're inspired to start creating your own vector artwork inside of Adobe Illustrator. And as I said at the beginning of the video, my Doodle brush pack is available in my Gumroad store for just $5, and I have a link to it in the description section of this video. And if you're interested in getting a little more drawing motivation, then be sure and check out my Doodle podcast series, where I draw a full-page doodle while talking about different topics like art and life in general. I'll put a link to that playlist at the end of this video. Now, once I launch the first video in my Draw With Me series, you'll be able to find a link to that playlist right here. But until that time, check out my Self-Publishing 101 playlist. It'll show you how you're going to make money as an artist once you learn how to draw. Until next time, take care.